So there are two really common misconceptions about muscle that are really important to kind of break down before we explore further. The first is that by repeatedly stretching a muscle day in, day out, that over time the muscle tissue itself lengthens. And this is not true. Okay, so earlier we talked about stretching simply being the origin and insertion of a muscle moving further apart. Now, in the moment of a stretch, that does happen in order for a particular movement to take place. But if the muscle tissue was actually lengthening with time, then either permanently the origin insertion would have to move further apart, so we'd permanently be changing the way that our bones are placed, or the tissue would be becoming almost so long that it would be slack. So imagine if every time you stretched your hamstrings, they became longer and longer. They would basically be hanging off the back of you when you walked around. It'd be a bit of a strange look. Previously, we talked about this concept of neuromuscular tissue and how the nervous system governs how the muscle behaves. So the priority of the nervous system is to keep us safe, and in terms of muscle, it is to prevent injury. Okay, so this brings us to a phenomenon known as stretch tolerance. So stretch tolerance is literally the amount of stretch that you can tolerate. So if you imagine doing a forward fold, most of us will feel some sort of sensation in our hamstrings. And when you reach a point where your nervous system no longer feels safe and maybe feels that there is a threat of injury, sensation is elicited that most of us will perceive as uncomfortable or unpleasant, and that will be the thing that prevents us from stretching further. So not necessarily the length of our tissue, but it's actually the sensation that is elicited by the nervous system. Okay, and we will explore this topic in more detail throughout this module. The other concept is that by strengthening a muscle, we shorten it. And this is a common kind of widespread belief amongst yoga practitioners. And there is a fear almost that as a yogi, if we're to do any strengthening work, even running, that it will undo all this wonderful lengthening work that we believed that we were doing, even though we weren't. Strengthening can actually help us to increase the amount of stretch available to us, and this will become a little bit more apparent again as we delve into deeper topics throughout this module. Tied in with this is the idea that prolonged sitting, say in a chair, shortens your hip flexors at the front of your thigh and shortens your hamstrings at the back of the body. Once again, that is just not the case. Like, if that actually happened, like, think of the amount of sitting that we all do every day. We would end up walking around like a T-Rex. Yeah, if long-term muscle actually shortened in that way. What is more likely the case is the fascial adhesions being created that we talked about earlier. So when you're in any position for a prolonged period, the fascia can start to adhere, and we need regular movement to prevent that from happening.